Welcome into the PantherExtra podcast. I'm your host, Ethan Petrick with the Waterloo-Cedar Falls Courier. Joining me, my sports editor, Jim Nelson, who's going to be providing some historical context to the show today. I like to lean on him for that kind of institutional knowledge that maybe I don't have, given that I didn't grow up in the area and I'm new to the area in the last 2 years. So he's got a little bit more of the background than I do. But to start us off today, I want to talk about a couple of UNI notes, a little couple items that have come up recently. First one is head volleyball coach at UNI, Bobbi Petersen, signing a 5-year contract extension, going to run through the 2028 season. Asked her on Tuesday why that was a agreement that she wanted to commit to, and she just kind of said, well, this is a special place, special to me and special to the people around it, and we have a commitment to build this program. So, gotten to talk to Coach Petersen a couple of times. Certainly somebody that I understand why the university wanted to enter into a 5-year agreement with her, get her to stick around a little bit longer with the success she's had here. So I just wanted to get her side of things. Obviously, anytime you're at a place for 23 years as she's been, I believe is the number quoted in the press release. It's going to be a special place in your heart. You're probably not going to leave that place anytime soon, but wanted to get that perspective. I'm not going to make Jim talk about that since he claims to have a bit of a conflict of interest.
I can talk all you want.
Okay, go ahead. From a UNI perspective, why is it important to keep Coach Petersen around?
Just got to look at her record. Almost 600 career match wins. How many titles? How many 16 NCAA tournament appearances? I mean, you're not going to get anybody that bleeds purple more than she does. She played here. She was an assistant coach here under Raj Bifard. And highly successful, as a head coach. So, 2 Sweet 16s. I think she was part of a coaching staff of 3 Sweet 16 appearances. So, I mean, she's through and through UNI volleyball. We talked about the West Gym last week on the PantherExtra. When Bobbi was coaching in the West Gym and they advanced Sweet 16 twice out of there was that atmosphere was absolutely crazy. And I'm pretty sure that's why there's some structural damage into it, because it got so loud in there when they won. They beat Missouri 1 year in 5 sets, came back from a 2-0 deficit, and then they beat Minnesota another year, coming back from a 2-0 deficit, and they beat them in 5, and that place was loud. It was hot, and it was, at that point when they moved to the McLeod Center, it was time they moved to the McLeod Center because the floor was getting a little old and a little uneven and stuff, and the ceiling was pretty close to the ground. So, but when they played volleyball there, and it was a high level of volleyball, it was a fun atmosphere there at the West Gym. So just anyway, she is all the part that's where she played at. She played in the West Gym too. She is UNI. She wants to, and obviously the obvious thing that people are going to notice here is 5 more years means she'll be able to coach her incoming daughter next year, Jaden Petersen, for 4 more through her career, unless Jaden plays for 5 years. Our red shirts are. So that this contract does keep her locked into place to coach the final Petersen coming through.
I wonder what the NCAA ruling is there. Would I be able to ask her a question about her daughter, but would it have to avoid a recruit context? I wonder how that would work, because you're not allowed to talk about recruits, but they're under the same roof. So I wonder how that works. And you made the joke when Jaden committed. What did she walk down to breakfast and say, "Hey, Mom, I'm going to come play for UNI"? It's a fun family to keep tabs on. They're certainly doing great things in the Cedar Valley in sports. I'm going to have to ask you to move a little bit to your left, though, Jim. You're a little bit out of the camera.
How is this better?
Yeah, but keep leaning into that microphone. Keep leaning into that. Yes. Okay. We like hearing that voice nice, clear, and crisp.
I'm new to this podcast and things, although I do love to talk into a microphone.
Hey, and maybe I should just put a microphone in front of you, because sometimes you go mute on me sitting next to me in the newsroom. On contract extension talk, Coach Jacobs with the softball team also signing a 2-year contract extension. Similar reasons that you want to keep Coach Petersen around, you want to keep Coach Jacobs around. He's built a very successful program. He played for UNI when UNI had a baseball team, so well before my time. He was a catcher for the Panthers. So certainly somebody that's also going to bleed purple and gold. Cedar Rapids native, so he's a Eastern Iowa boy growing up. So just another person that you want to keep around, keep close to the program. And then Kira Follert, the UNI outside hitter, winning MVC Offensive Player of the Week. She had 41 kills in Omaha. You wrote up more of the Blue Jay Invitational stuff than than I did. So tell me a little bit about what you took away from the volleyball weekend.
I was reading. I listened in on the Bobby's comments and what you wrote this week about in the our UNOX package, which is online right now, or will be online tomorrow morning. Excuse me. And they just had a really good weekend compared to a year ago when they went into that and they went 0-3 and didn't win any matches. And they were 1-5 coming out of that after their first 2 weeks. And in the end, it didn't. It's not going to hurt them in the end because they play such a tough schedule. But you beat an SEC school, which I had looked into that and. The amazing thing is UNI's got a winning record against SEC opponents, and it's more than 20-some matches in their all-time program history. It's and part of that's because they played Missouri so often, and now Missouri was developed into there. But beating LSU right out of the gates and really handling LSU right out of the gates, that was impressive.
It was a sweep.
The LSU received votes in the preseason poll. I mean, I think that team had high expectations and UNI really, controlled that match and played very well. I mean, the first match, I think the first game was pretty close, and second game, and then UNI pulled away in third. So tremendous performance there. And then Ball State. So you listened to Bobby last week. In Ball State, UNI lost to Western Michigan at the Western Michigan tournament, and Ball State was picked to finish ahead of Western Michigan in I believe, the MAC West, or the MAC East, or the MAC, one of the two divisions of the MAC. So. Ball State, and to win that one the way they did, very, very well played. And then they took a match. I took a 36-34 game from Creighton, went forward with a ranked team in the top 20 team. So I think a lot to build on from that. Some young players playing for the Panthers and, all aims for, aiming towards it's going to be a really tough Missouri Valley Conference slate. But, you're looking at, this could be a real super confidence builder at 3-3 through. We're talking a 500. We're talking 500 here, but 500 impressive the way they played from week 1 to the week 2 and so much season left, but this is an NCAA tournament team. I think she's built again.
Well, and as I noted in my UNI notes package, through 6 games last year, 1-5. You can look at it and say, well, they played 3 top 25 teams in the Blue Jay Invitational last year. With LSU, one of those was a number 25 USC team. LSU's receiving votes. That's right in that 25 range. Ball State not in that poll category, but Creighton a top 20 team. So maybe not as high a caliber without Kentucky being in the tournament this year, but you're still getting a pretty good look at some really high quality teams, and they're going to get another look against 2 Power 5 teams in TCU and Texas A&M this weekend. Those are going to be fun watches, and then a Utah State team that I've actually seen this year. I got to watch them play my sister-in-law in Lincoln 2 weekends ago, and I can't remember anything major from the Utah State except that I just felt like they had great size in the front row. So maybe I'm completely wrong on that, but I just felt like they were pretty oppressive, and it was really hard for the Atlantic Sun Lipscomb Bisons to get around that block. So that's a little bit of my pre-existing knowledge on the Aggies. So I think they're going to get some really great looks here in the non-con, and I feel like they're putting up the kind of performance you need to show the committee that hey, this team could be something in the tournament, and maybe not have to come in and play a real high seed right out of the gate like they did last year when they beat Florida State.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so great weekend for Panther volleyball. Not so great weekend for Panther football. That's why we'll transition into a little bit of a debrief of last week's game. And I'm just going to come out and say it. I was completely wrong with my prediction. I'll own that. Way off. The number the score prediction I gave Colbert sitting in the press box was 27-21. UNI wins. I said I thought UNI was going to win. I vastly underestimated the Iowa State secondary, and that's kind of what Coach Farley told us on Tuesday. Was someone told him that was the best defense in the Big 12. I feel like he probably knew that already, but UNI could not pass the ball against the Cyclones. What showed up on the TV as you were watching it?
I think what Coach Farley and you witnesses, what we witnesses. There's a statistic, and it's not on the tip of my tongue right now, but Iowa State has held 20 straight opponents now under.
I did not see the stat.
Yeah, it's something incredible. Maybe it was under 20 or under 25 points. 20 straight opponents. Incredible defensive. What it is? I'm looking at the wrong number. I might be talking points. It could be 200, 400, 400 yards or something like that. But what they have done is, I think what you and I, we expect a lot more of the offense, and we probably underestimated how good this Cyclone defense was going to be because they lost so much on the front end. And so you thought maybe that you and I could take advantage. They're going to have to shore some things up by maybe bringing some safeties high or closer to the line of scrimmage to take some things away. And, there's going to open up some of the pass game. It is what it is. I thought you and I could win that game, but it is an FCS program going against the FBS program. The FBS showed that they have an elite defense there, probably a top 20 defense. And you and I struggled to move the ball. I thought there was glimpses of it. I thought the run game had some really good glimpses of it. And then Theo, maybe not as consistent as he'd like. I don't think anybody he made some really good throws where he threaded the needle with some good catches and stuff. Just not enough. They got behind early, and and sometimes when things go a little sideways, it doesn't matter how good you are. What you can't for some reason get to go straight north and south or whatever it is, or east and west, however you want to put it. It's just I wouldn't disappointing. Yeah, I'm sure it's disappointing, but I think you also got to give credit where credit was due. And Iowa State's defense really showed up. They showed up, and they really showed up. I think they were tired of hearing about how good of a quarterback Theo Day was, and they showed up and said, "All right, go ahead, let's go." And they played an outstanding game.
Had I been able to go down to Ames on Tuesday, I think I might have asked that question because it wasn't me asking the question. I let the TV guys to handle that one last Tuesday or 2 Tuesdays ago when we were previewing the UNI Iowa State game. But every defender was asked, you're going up against a really notable quarterback in Theo Day. And I told you last week I was really surprised by their confidence going up against that. And it was well placed, apparently. I mean, they had a plan and they did shut him down. And that's exactly what Carson Willich told us, and that's exactly what Joey Petersen told us. And so I was really surprised, and I'm sure that was probably fuel because it wasn't necessarily bulletin board material, but it was almost as if people cared more about the FCS quarterback coming into your house in a bye game than they did about what you were going to do. And so I'm sure that was a bit of a chip that they had on their shoulders. In talking about Theo's game, I mean, Coach Farley just came out and said it in the post game on Saturday. Theo missed some throws. There's some throws where maybe he was taking a chance when he shouldn't have. The second interception right before half, I don't know what he saw on that play, but there was a blanket. There was 4 Iowa State defenders around Brady McCullough when he threw that one. And at that point, kind of felt like I don't want to compare him to Sam Darnold from a couple of years ago because that's a horrible comp for anybody who wants to be an NFL quarterback. But Sam Darnold said in a post game, it's like, I'm trying to throw a 21-point touchdown. And it just kind of felt like Theo was trying to make up the entire deficit with one throw. And so I'm sure he felt a little bit of the weight of all of our offseason talk. One of the papers down south wrote a story about him. I wrote a story about him, really hyping him up. And when I talked to Coach Farley for that story, he said, well, now you have the challenge of the weight of those expectations. It's how you manage them is going to be the most telling thing about it. And maybe in this first one, just learning how to deal with some of that pressure of being the guy that everyone's looking at to win a game when it gets awry like that. And then one other thing you mentioned is it felt disappointing, and it felt like maybe that early pick six took some air out of the game. And I wrote in my Turning Points story, all 4 of those plays that I said turned the momentum happened in the first half. And I'm not going to pretend like I'm some football genius here. I certainly feel like I know more than my wife, who doesn't watch any football. But Coach Farley mentioned all 4 of those plays that I mentioned in my Turning Points during the postgame. He tried to backtrack on one of them on Tuesday, but he mentioned all 4 on Saturday. And it just felt like that game was over before it even got going. And maybe some of that was the new clock rules, but it felt like by the time that Chase Contreras hit that 56-yarder at halftime, pack it up, hit the locker room. You can kind of how this one's going to end. And I feel like that overshadowed a little bit of a UNI surge in the second half. They outgained ISU, they outscored ISU. So there were some likable things in the second half, but that first half was just so awful that it overshadowed it a little bit. When you're looking at the way they finished that game, Jim, what stands out to you?
They played to the end, but, at the same time, Iowa State had it in control, and they knew they had it in control. So if they're going to give up a few yards, and, that's no sweat off their back. So I think Iowa State knew that, there was confidence there. They knew they could ramp it back up if they had to, and they had a comfortable lead, and time was on their hand. Yeah, I just want to go back to your comment. I thought, too, when you talk about it, I thought that was a great analogy about he tried to throw a 21-point pass. They were down 14-0. They hadn't played well, and they were trying to quick strike there late in the first half. I thought maybe that I'm not a coach. I don't know. I'm not smart enough to be one. I can't read the film that well. I see what I can see, but it looked like to me that the smart play might have been there just to maybe do like a, take 4 or 5 yards and get a couple first downs and go into halftime down 14-0 and regroup and possibly you're looking at, but instead that it's going from 14 and what was it 24 nothing at half or
I believe they were trailing 20-0 when he threw the second interception, and it was 23-0.
Yeah, so I think I'm thinking of the drive before that where they tried to go, and when let's try to bleed some clock down and not give Iowa State a chance to really put the final nail in the coffin. So, but I think they did some things good. There were some good throws by Theo in the second half. There were some solid runs. The defense made some plays, not the big plays, not the splashy plays, but they made some more plays to slow that offense down a little bit and force some punts. So there was positives too, but at the same time, I think Iowa State had, for lack of a better term, put it a little bit on cruise control in the second half, especially after they scored on that first possession of the third quarter, and then what was 27-0. So,
and the thing you're kind of keying on there, I feel like, is when this offense wants to go fast, when they want a quick strike, you're not going to burn a lot of time off the clock, and that is the con, I guess, to a Bobbi Reader type throw the ball around offense is. You're not going to take a lot of time off the clock. And so if your defense is getting gassed, if your offense goes out there and has 4 plays and go 3 and out, it's not going to work very well for you because the defense will be right back out there. They're not going to have a chance to, catch their wind. Or for a defense that's breaking in 5 new starters, they're not going to have a chance to discuss with Jeremiah Johnson or Coach Pop on the sidelines what maybe they failed to do on that last drive that they need to fix or clean up, or maybe where could have, wrapped up Rocco Becht in the backfield because he broke a couple of sacks and they ended up with 0 in that game. And that was the one thing that Coach Farley mentioned is the defense. I thought the defense played well, only allowed 250 or less than 250 yards, maybe exactly 250 total yards, 250 total yards, 134 yards rushing, 116 yards passing. I felt like they played well, but I asked Coach Farley. He says, well, they failed to make a momentum turning play. They needed the defense to pick up the offense, and the defense couldn't do it. And so maybe a couple extra, a minute longer on offense in that second quarter is enough to, get to a Corey Thomas Jr. and say, hey, this is how you create an interception on this play. Get to a Ben Bellikin, a Josiah Galvin. This is how you tackle a guy 3 yards shorter than the 7-yard gain you allowed or something like that. So I certainly feel like there were some missed opportunities, and maybe some of that would be a product of just the way this offense is built. But when you love it, you got to take the cons with it too. So we do love the Bobbi Reader offense. It was very exciting to watch last year. It's just at times isn't the best for situational football, I guess.
Yeah, when you talk about that defense too, I think you're talking about making momentum play. I think what they really needed and what Farley really needed is a 3 and out on that first possession, and Iowa State went right. I mean, just zipped right down the field and scored. So it was still felt like even after a 20-minute break that the Panthers were still a little shell shocked from being down 20-0 at half, and that's what it looked like, in that first inning. And then after that, like I said, it was cruise control. So I don't think you're not throwing on the towel yet. That's game 1. You're playing a pretty good team that's motivated to be better than 4-8 that they were last year after playing in several bowl games in a row. You got to take it. You want to win the game, and I felt they could win it, but it didn't happen. And now you got a big opponent coming up, and you got to turn the page fast, and let's move on. Let's get on to what they can control.
Yeah, you mentioned the game that they have coming up. We'll shift gears to that really quick here. If you want to hear more about what Coach Farley had to say about the Iowa State game, you can check out my story. It's coming out tomorrow morning. Really keys in on some issues that plague the defense and what he needs to see out of the offense against Weber State. Speaking of the Wildcats, you were in Ogden for the last matchup between the Panthers and Wildcats. It was a 2019 game. Weber State pulled out the win 29-17, evening the series at 2 games apiece. The home team has always won in this series. Jim, you've told me a little bit about your time in Ogden. Share some of that with our audience here.
It was a very pretty area.
I'm from that country, so I know. I'm from that country.
It was pretty. It was pretty. That game was really weird. What Weber State is consistently one of the top teams in the Big Sky Conference. But this is going to be a different beast. New coach this year for them. Different thing. What I recall that 2019 game is it almost mirrors the game that the Panthers just played last week. There was a plethora of errors right off. You and I had a couple positive plays right off start off the game, and then punt first play they have a breakdown in coverage. It's something that you rarely see with the Mark Farley, Jeremiah John. I mean, I remember this play. The kid ran wide open. I mean, it was 75-yard touchdown play, and nobody defended him. It was so bam, they're down 7-0. Come right back. You and I fumbles ensuing kickoff 10-0. Next you and I possession. Pass over the middle, is tipped by a linebacker, intercepted, 17-0. Next it's 17-0 before you and I can anything happen. And I think it was 27-0 at one point, 27-0. And it was just and they were down 27-3 at one point, but they got down 17-0 in the first quarter, and they trailed 27-3 at one point before
at halftime. At halftime,
27-3 at halftime.
Nope, no. Right before halftime, Will McElvain hits a long touchdown pass to Isaiah Weston, who got hurt in the fourth quarter of that game. And so they're trailing 27-10. And fun tidbit from your story here, in the second half of that game, UNI only allows 1 total yard on to Weber State's offense in the second half, and they're not able to crawl out of that hole, which is, like you said, it mirrors the game against Iowa State, because at one point with like 5 minutes left, I think they got like a garbage time series, Iowa State did, but they had 85 yards in the entire second half, and it was almost entirely just that touchdown drive that you mentioned to start this half. So Weber State gets basically the Iowa State treatment in 2019.
The one thing to factor in there too is they gave up only 1 net yard, but Weber State's punter down 5 punts inside the 10-yard line in the second half. It was absolutely a phenomenal job of punting to just keep you and I buried and having to force them to go 95 yards. Go the length of the field. If you're going to come back, go the length of the field. You're down by 3. That late touchdown, I remember that too. It's like, okay, 27-10. Now they got a shot here. Maybe, can come out. And, they kept on getting buried. And it just never happened. It was, a really weird game. And it's going to be a good one. It's a big one on the national scene. Big one on the national scene. 2 teams, ranked teams, and you win this one, and you got one, and you got one in your back pocket that's going to help when it comes to seeding or at large berths. If you're not the champ, and you're looking for an at large berth, this is a big game Saturday.
And Weber State opening their season with a win, 35-10 over Central Washington. Stay tuned. We're going to say goodbye to Jim, but we'll pick it back up with Brett Hein of The Standard-Examiner out of Ogden, Utah. He is found on Twitter at WeberHQ. We're going to talk to him, preview a little bit of this matchup, and maybe get learn a little bit about the upcoming opponent. So keep it tuned for that. But we'll go ahead and say goodbye to Jim. Back here on the PantherExtra podcast with Brett Hein, the Standard-Examiner in Ogden, Utah. Brett, thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us here on the show.
Yeah, good to be on. I appreciate it. Always good to talk. It's crazy. It feels like we're still out here. It's still really hot. It's been really hot, so it feels weird to be this deep into football season already. But always good to talk football now and have real games to talk about, not all the other stuff.
Absolutely. We got a little tied up in the off-season talk here in Iowa, talking a little bit too much about Northern Iowa's quarterback Theo Day before the season, and he made me eat some of my words on Saturday with a less than performance against Iowa State. But wanted to bring you on to talk a little bit about Weber State and what the Wildcats are going to be bringing to Cedar Falls this weekend. Could you just give us kind of a state of the program? What's going on with the Wildcats in year one of Mickey Mental?
Yeah, I mean that's the huge big picture state of the program is that Weber State has a new head coach, which in some ways a lot of people felt like this would probably come sooner. For whatever reason, the opportunities didn't come for Jay Hill, but he proved that he could build a program, and he did that over 9 seasons at Weber State. So yeah, that's the big thing is that new head coach Mickey Mental. So for those unfamiliar out there in Iowa and elsewhere, so Mickey Mental is an Ohio native. He he played D2 football at Baldwin Wallace. He was a quarterback. Um, he he got his start at Notre Dame College, the D2 program, which is like basically brand new football program. Worked his way up, became offensive coordinator, and then was the head coach there for 2 seasons. And he was hired before last season to be the offensive coordinator at Weber State. And so then when Jay Hill moved on to his new job, they chose Mickey Mental to be the next head coach. So he's an offensive guy, but with Jay Hill's promotion, I guess, associate head coach and defensive coordinator at BYU, that was kind of a singular hiring. He wasn't hired to be a head coach anywhere else. So everyone else is still on staff at Weber State, which helps obviously with continuity and scheme and all that. The two co-defensive coordinators are the same, every single spot except a DN coach is the same as it has been for the last several years. So yeah, that's the big picture. They're trying to keep that rolling, keep what he built going, and Mickey Mental's putting his spin on it with the way he calls an offense and his scheme and all that. But those around here remember a time when it wasn't that long ago. I guess it's maybe like 20 years, but wasn't that long ago when there were serious discussions about killing the football program at Weber State. And last 10 years, it's become a perennially important program nationally, a relevant program nationally, not just a team that competes in the Big Sky, but competes at a national level. So yeah, that's what they're trying to do. It's a tall task, but the program has never been in a better spot. Every single year in the recent 5 years has been a first this, first that, first time for whatever ranking or getting so far into the playoffs or whatever. So that's the big picture. It's a program that's been around for a while, but didn't really reach those heights until the last 5 or 6 years.
Looking at it in week one of the mental era, if you will, kind of a up and down performance against Central Washington from what I can glean from that game. Was that it kind of seemed like it was maybe a bit of a letdown performance. Can you share what your takeaways were from that game?
Yeah, so looking at it just that game in a vacuum, I would agree, and the players agreed too after the game. They just said, all due respect to their opponent. When you're playing a Division II team, you expect to perform a certain way, and they did. In the second half, they were disappointed in kind of the, I don't know what you call it, just kind of the energy and effort and kind of taking control of the game early that they didn't do. They struggled early to run the football and kind of move the line of scrimmage and things. And the defense took a couple possessions to really get their feet set. But honestly, from the final 3 quarters, they controlled and dominated the game like you'd hope if you're on that team, or like you'd expect. So yeah, it was a little bit of a mixed bag. I mean, the offensive line is experienced, but the center is new, so that was kind of a new dynamic. Center's a transfer from NAIA Carroll College, so and then all but one of the receivers is basically brand new, getting their first big time reps. But they came out in the third quarter, ran the football, controlled everything defensively, kept Central Washington from passing the ball at all, really inefficient. So mostly did what they wanted, but for what the game was, they expected a little more. Now, going beyond that vacuum, I thought the same thing last year. First game, Mickey Mental as offensive coordinator. They played Western Oregon, who's the other D2 team out here in the West, the only other one.
Mm-hmm.
And that was underwhelming. It was super underwhelming. And I was like, oh man, I don't know about this. And then they came out the next week and beat Utah State by 4 touchdowns. So, you never really know. There's a combination of getting used to each other, how much are they holding back? How much do they not want to put on tape? All that stuff. So, but for what it was, you know, they didn't quite take control of the game as early as they hoped, but by the end, it was, the game was never in doubt or anything like that. So, yeah, it's a little bit of a mixed bag for sure.
It's interesting because the way you kind of describe the Central Washington game, it's a lot of the same descriptors that people around here are using to describe uh, Northern Iowa's loss to Iowa State last week. Not enough energy, they failed to do what they expected. So you guys get the win playing down a league. Northern Iowa takes a loss playing up a league. And it's still like the same takeaways, because I think Northern Iowa kind of expected to beat the Cyclones given all of the stuff that's swirling around that program going into the season. So it'll be interesting because I think both teams are coming into this game, from the sounds of it, with the same goals in place. Find that right amount of energy, find the right amount of urgency, and kind of establish themselves again, and for maybe the first time in this season. What have you gleaned from the team coming into this game? What are they hoping to accomplish? What are they expecting out of you and I?
Yeah, I mean, they one of the hallmarks of the program, one of the ways they, I guess, do business that has been the culture. And Mickey Mental has said a bunch of times, like, he's not looking to change the culture or fix anything. Everything was fine. Uh, he's just trying to build and keep moving forward. And one of the things that has helped Weber State most of the time is, um, you know, uh, they it's cliche, but they respect all opponents equally, and they the coaches have been around long enough, and some of those players to know that going on the road anywhere is hard. Um, and I think it's pretty well known that anytime you go on the road to a Missouri Valley team, you're going to be in for a tough game. Um, so yeah, I think they're uh, focused on making sure they can run the football. I know there's some respect there for the D line and the D tackle there. And yeah, I mean, it's the big picture for this season, though, which it's kind of hard. It's hard to talk about because people won't admit it, because they do want to take it, week by week, game by game, whatever. Is that this game means a ton to Weber State as far as their schedule goes. They they kind of scheduled themselves into. They had a couple options. They could have opened last week with an even more prominent Missouri Valley team. But then they would have played that team, Northern Iowa on the road, Utah, and Montana State in the first 4 weeks of the season. And they opted not to do that. But what that does for the big picture, this is a team that expects to make the playoffs. Um, it makes this game really, really important because, last week doesn't count. And next week they play Utah. Um, and, Utah's Utah's been one of the most consistently good programs in Power Five FBS for the last 10 years. Um, so they
If we could
expect to
stick
compete
on
there,
that
but no one expects them to win. So that means Northern Iowa, they kind of have to win this game. It makes them, if they do, it gives them kind of a cushion in Big Sky play, and if they don't, um, they've got to they have to do really well in the Big Sky, or else the playoffs might not happen.
Yeah, let's stick on that Utah game a little bit, because I did see that kind of sitting there, and that's big brother in the state a little bit. Is there any feeling from you that you mentioned that they want to respect every opponent, but is there any talk about the Utes already kind of bubbling under the surface, or is the focus solely on this trip out to Cedar Falls?
Um, I don't think that they're looking ahead to Utah at all. Like, um, I don't know. That's a weird subject because unlike unlike Iowa's Power Five schools, who have been known to struggle against even FCS teams, Utah just doesn't do that. They so it's a game that they want to compete in and want to give themselves a chance to win, but I don't think anyone's gearing themselves up for that in lieu of preparing for Northern Iowa, I guess. Because, like I said, the Northern Iowa game is really, because when you lose against a team like Utah, nobody holds that against you when it comes to the playoff committee and whatnot. It is what it is. But so I think, I think that there's not going to be much to that. I guess I think it really is all about this week, is cliche as that is.
And then to wrap it up today, just looking at the quarterback position, you get Kylan Weiser back. He's in his, I believe, 5th year with the program now, but didn't start last year. That was a 6th year with the program. Okay. I said before we started recording that we graduated high school the same year, so maybe I should have had a better idea of what that number was. I graduated college 2 years ago. He's still a junior in college. I don't know how that works out, but I trust him. But Bronson Barron was the starter last year. He's at Western Kentucky now. Was that a departure that they kind of expected, or did that catch them by surprise where maybe they didn't have a backup plan coming into the season?
Yeah, that whole thing was a little weird. Just because I don't know, the feeling was that Bronson Barron made some really good steps forward, and because he was still young, he still had a few years left. He still had 2 seasons left after last year. Um, and he had really good moments and did some solid things. But I would say it was somewhat surprising. I wouldn't have seen him as a candidate to, um, be highly recruited for an FBS program. But he found a spot where he's not expected to play this year, and they have like a senior incumbent. And I don't think he ever used his red shirt, so he could red shirt there. But it was still kind of like, oh, that's interesting. Like, uh, okay. Kylan Weiser had put his name in the portal before that, and he decided to come back after everything kind of unfolded, and they hired, retained Mickey Mental for to continue calling the offense and be the head coach, and then Bronson Barron, transferred. So it was kind of a weird situation, I guess you could say. But yeah, Kylan Weiser, he's been in the program forever. He's only has a few starts here and there. Um, he's come in some big games and played really well. Like a few years back, they hosted James Madison here in Ogden, and the offense couldn't do anything. And they put him into the second half, and it kind of gave him a boost, and they scored a few times. Same thing happened last year in the playoffs against Montana State. After that wild highest scoring game in the regular season, they went back in the playoffs and struggled offensively. It was really cold, and Montana State couldn't run they could run the football on anybody last year, at least. So, but yeah, it's kind of the same situation we talked about with some of the other components of their team. He's got to find a feel for the guys around him, and so yeah, it's hard to know what to expect. If last week some of the missed throws or just timing issues or whatever, if that's like if that's going to be a regular thing, or if that's just kind of a normal thing for an opener for a quarterback, an older quarterback who's still a bit inexperienced and a lot of new guys around him. The plus side is the O-line is experienced, and the running backs are experienced, and if they can get 100-yard games out of Damon Bankston every week, I'm sure they'll take that. So yeah, but it's kind of still a wait and see. I think the expectation is that he's old enough and experienced enough to be able to put in a really good season as the guy.
All right. I appreciate your time again, Brett. Do you do predictions at all? Have you made a prediction for this game yet?
I don't do predictions.
All right. All right.
No, I don't.
All right. I fell flat on my face with the upset prediction last week for UNI over Iowa State. So maybe I should take a little bit of a page out of your playbook and hold off on predictions as well. But I appreciate your time joining the show, and I look forward to a fun game on Saturday.
Yeah, there's especially something, those of us who aren't part of this. There's something fun about dome games. I don't know what it is. Um, Weber State's, I think they've played in every dome in the FCS in the last 5 seasons or so, 6 seasons. Something about dome football that makes it feel a little more exciting, maybe a little more wacky sometimes. So, so yeah, looking forward to watching this one. Northern Iowa's always good, and this one could mean a lot for both teams in the big picture at the end of the season.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brett.